The MCU broke Spider Man, and now I'm worried that there's no going back. Hello there, and welcome to today's video. Now, Spider Man is one of the most beloved superheroes ever created. He's had movies, animated series, action figures, lunchboxes, you name it. Even if you've never picked up a comic book in your life, you know who Spider-Man is. Everyone knows what his powers are, what his costume looks like, and what his uncle's dying words to him were. But I think a lot of people don't realize why Spider-Man resonates the way he does. And I think the popularity of the MCU has been a massive contributor to a lot of the misconceptions about the character that are currently swirling around out there. So, with his fourth MCU movie coming out relatively soon, I'd like to examine just what exactly makes Spider-Man so memorable and beloved, and how the MCU has tarnished those characteristics. And I'm going to do this by examining four things. The first is what makes Spider-Man so beloved in the first place. The second is how the MCU crafted his relationship with Tony Stark, and how that ultimately proved to be detrimental to the character. The third is how the MCU removed consequences from the Spider-Man mythos. And the fourth and final element is how the MCU Spidey can't seem to stand on his own. Spider-Man is memorable because, in many ways, he's the most realistic hero in comics. I mean, sure, his powers don't make sense and break physics, and they've been wildly inconsistent in the comics anyway, but he's fundamentally relatable. See, I can admire Batman's iron willpower, Superman's eternal optimism, and Wolverine's gruff, badass, unkillable shtick, but I can relate to Spider-Man being broke. I can relate to him juggling multiple spheres of his life and often dropping the balls. Now, I don't know what it's like to be a billionaire or an alien or a mutant, but I know what it's like to be a student trying to have enough money to do the things I want to and try and maintain a social life. I know what it's like to prioritize certain things in my life at the expense of others. And sure, the choices I make don't really involve a person's life on the line, but the choices are still relatable. See, instead of choosing between saving a life and keeping a commitment to a friend like Spider-Man, my choices can be something as seemingly inconsequential as choosing between seeing a friend for something I really want to do or going to a family function that I'd already committed to. But regardless of the choice, I've still got to deal with the consequences. And so does Spider-Man. This theme of choices and their consequences is central to Spider-Man as a character. Every single time Spider-Man wins, Peter Parker loses, and vice versa. It makes for a compelling and really dramatic character. And sure, modern writers have kind of taken that to unpalatable extremes, but it's still a core part of why Spider-Man is so fascinating. And one of the biggest reasons this theme works is Spider-Man's status as a perpetual loner. He can't just go ask Captain America for money because he's broke. Spider-Man has been on a bunch of famous superhero teams, but he can't turn to them in his most basic, everyday struggles. In that sense, he's alone in a crowd of titans, all seemingly above these kinds of struggles. In mythic terms, Spider-Man is a tragic hero. Not because he loses, but because he continually loses alone. Spider-Man's nature as a loner, coupled with his themes of choices and consequences, means that as a character, he deals with a lot of guilt due to his moral code, and honestly a fair bit of depression too due to the consequences of the choices he makes. And that's an incredibly relatable state to have one of the world's most popular superheroes in, especially in this day and age. He's constantly doubting and agonizing over the choices he's made, always looking back and wondering if he should have done things differently. And that's something everyone can connect with. That's why Spider-Man is memorable amongst a pantheon of superheroes. So, if being a true everyman makes him memorable, what catapults him into the status of beloved icon? And it's a few things. For one, anyone can be Spider-Man. His whole body is covered by spandex, so anyone can envision themselves swinging through the streets of New York. And that's a powerful thing. But beyond that, it's the fact that Spider-Man is truly a street-level hero. Sure, he's tangled with multiversal threats and aliens of all manner of ridiculously powerful enemies, but at his core, Spider-Man is a friendly neighborhood superhero, just trying to help people as best he can. It ties nicely with what Bishop, a time-traveling mutant from an apocalyptic future, said, that where he's from, Spider-Man is regarded as the greatest hero who ever lived, because he never forgot about the common people on the street. Throw in all the icing, like his witty banter with villains, be it because he's scared or just finally able to be himself because of the mask, his friendship with heroes like the Human Torch, Wolverine, and Daredevil, or the fact that he's been on some of the most prestigious superhero teams in Marvel, but he's still considered a loner, and you've got one of the greatest superheroes ever created. It's a winning formula that the MCU seems to have completely abandoned, and it all started with Tony Stark. The introduction of Tony Stark into the beginning of Peter's journey as Spider-Man changed Peter from a plucky underdog just doing his best into an employee hand-picked for his incredible ability. See, Peter had the perfect introduction in Civil War. He was a dumpster-diving teen who got dragged into a conflict between the Avengers because Tony Stark liked his look, his abilities, and his moral compass. In return for his help against Cap, Tony gives Spidey a brand new high-tech suit. And that should have been the first red flag for all Spidey fans, myself included. But we missed it. Gone were Spidey's financial troubles. He was now backed by one of the richest men in the MCU. No longer was Peter a DIY hero who had to learn how to sew in order to make and upkeep his costume after battles. Now, Spidey gets his suits courtesy of Tony Stark, or Tony's technology. The most cutting-edge technology on the planet, mind you. And, maybe this could have worked if the rest of Spidey's core attributes were maintained, but they weren't. Homecoming shows that Peter is still a friendly neighborhood Spider-Man, always helping the little guy, except the only reason he's doing that is because that's all Tony is letting him do. It leads to a massive problem as Spidey's first 3 team-up movies and his first 2 solo movies all revolve around his relationship with Tony Stark. His first 2 solo movie villains are directly tied to the fact that Tony screwed them over in some way. And in Far From Home, Peter is grappling with the idea of having to shoulder Tony's legacy. Everything from Civil War up until Far From Home has Tony driving Peter's story. I mean, the entirety of Homecoming is all about Peter trying to impress Tony enough to make him an Avenger. Tony reframed Peter's archetype from the burdened underdog to the chosen protege. And once you make that swap, the entire character's moral gravity changes. It flies completely in the face of Spider-Man standing for the common man and being something of a blue-collar worker. Peter and Tony don't exactly get along in the comics all that well for pretty much that exact reason. In the comics, Tony symbolizes futurism, ego, and upward mobility. Everything Peter isn't. But having Tony Stark being a crutch for Peter to rely on takes a lot of the weight out of the idea that Spidey's a self-made hero. In short, the MCU swapped Spider-Man's defining burden, self-reliance, for a fantasy about mentorship and privilege. And that has consequences for the character. Or does it? Tom Holland's Spider-Man has been left with a severe lack of consequences for his actions. The MCU's Peter didn't live in a world where choices carry weight. Things happen to him, but they don't shape him. He quits all of his extracurriculars to be Spider-Man, but as soon as he needs the decathlon to be somewhere as Spider-Man, he's let back onto the team no questions asked. He abandons the decathlon team during a crisis, and there's no lasting fallout. His best friend finds out he's Spider-Man, and it only strengthens their relationship with no added tension or drama. The closest he gets in Homecoming is Tony taking his suit away, essentially severing ties with him, and Liz having to leave school because her dad is put in jail. But neither of these have any real lasting impact on him. Peter pretty much forgets about Liz throughout the rest of his movie appearances, and by the end of Homecoming, Tony's given Peter back his suit, and in fact, he actually wants to give him an upgrade and promote him to being a full-time Avenger. Far From Home deals with the fallout from Endgame, which sees Peter having to deal with, the fallout of Tony's death. But once again, Peter is making choices with no lasting consequences to them. He once again reveals his identity, this time to MJ, and there's no issue on that front. They just start dating. He goes overseas with his classmates and ditches them continuously to be Spider-Man for S.H.I.E.L.D., and nothing really happens beyond a few jokes at his expense. In the comics, Peter's life would be falling around his ears, with his classmate thinking he's a complete weirdo, and his teachers being angry and disappointed in him, resulting in his life simply getting harder. The closest we get is a weak joke that Peter hired a prostitute in Amsterdam. Peter even gives Edith a functioning missile system to Mysterio, and there are no real consequences to this action. It's all sorted by the end of the film. But then, at last, it seems like there'll be some real, lasting consequences to Peter's actions, as his identity is revealed at the end of Far From Home. But then No Way Home eradicates this premise after a really effective go at rolling with it at the start of the film. I mean, we see Peter being ostracized, put on a pedestal, and really grappling with the aftermath of Far From Home. At long last, the MCU gives Spider-Man some consequences to grapple with. And then the memory spell happens, and all of the consequences are undercut by nostalgia. Now listen, I love No Way Home, but it has some serious problems. I want to do a whole video on the problems the movie has, but suffice it to say that Peter does end up grappling with some serious consequences at the end of the film, like the death of Aunt May and being broke and alone with no one remembering who he is. But the mechanics to get there were ridiculous, and all of it was overshadowed by the other two Spider-Men in that film, leaving Tom Holland's Parker feeling like the weakest link in his own movie. Which brings us nicely into the fact that the MCU Spider-Man can't seem to stand on his own. Spider-Man's mythology has always been about isolation. Not, the faux glamorous kind, but the painful, necessary solitude of someone who carries a burden no one else can see. In the comics, Spider-Man stands alone even when he's surrounded by his friends. In the MCU, though, Pete has a co-star or supervisor in every single movie. Civil War sees Tony recruit Peter and begin his mentorship relationship with him. Homecoming, Peter has Tony and Happy telling him what to do as a hero and who to save. Infinity War finds Peter relying on Tony, Doctor Strange, and the Guardians to battle Thanos. And in Endgame, Peter is part of a literal army of Avengers, with Tony being his emotional lifeline. In Far From Home, Peter's propped up by Nick Fury and S.H.I.E.L.D.'s resources. Whether Fury is the real Fury or not is kind of inconsequential here. But even with Tony's death, his legacy and Spidey's place within it is still dominating the film. And No Way Home finds Tom Holland's Peter fighting beside Doctor Strange and two other, more well-rounded Spider-Men who absolutely steal the spotlight in what should have been this Spider-Man's defining film. And now, well, the announcements have been coming in that Brand New Day is going to feature Spider-Man teaming up with Mark Ruffalo's Hulk and Jon Bernthal's Punisher, proving that the MCU seemingly doesn't trust Spider-Man to carry his own story. And beyond that, it proves that the people over at Marvel, as well as Kevin Feige, have a misunderstanding of what street heroism is supposed to be in the MCU, and that Spider-Man's core appeal lies in his internal battles, his guilt, his fears, and his moral struggles that no one else can help him with. The MCU has given us a Spider-Man who is never alone long enough to become who he's meant to be. Growing up, Peter Parker taught us that our struggles mattered, even the small ones, and that being a hero didn't mean being perfect, it meant choosing to care, even when the world didn't care back. The MCU reframed Peter's narrative arc from a solitary myth about consequence into a mentorship story about legacy. And in doing so, they shifted his archetype entirely, from the burdened everyman to the chosen successor. And whether they meant to or not, they've undermined the very foundations of their most popular character. And I'm not so sure that he can be fixed anymore, because Spider-Man isn't great because he wins. He's great because he struggles. And until the MCU remembers that, their Spider-Man will remain broken. Honestly, I enjoyed No Way Home. It was cool. I loved seeing Toby and Andrew back. I think Andrew got so much redemption that honestly, I'd be more interested in seeing a Spider-Man movie for him, just to kind of give him that true closure than I am about, the MCU continuing and Tom Holland and all of that. Having said that, I'm still excited to see Tom Holland and John Bernthal's Punisher kind of interacting and all that. But, with Marvel's track record, I'm not exactly crossing my fingers. But anyway, let me know what you think about Tom Holland's iteration of Spider-Man, how the MCU's handled him. Are you excited for Brand New Day? Let me know in the comments down below, and thank you for watching.